All right, guys. Hey, thanks for joining me. I am kneeling down. There's the top of the soil probe. I am hunkered down behind the pickup. I am only 2 arm lengths away, and you can see my hair still being tousled and it blowing up my skirt pretty good. Not gonna lie, it feels good. But yeah, so why farmers do tillage? Because it is so windy out. I need to hide the camera a little bit. It tipped the tripod right over. I mean, a $4,000 tripod, you think it would stand up better, but whatever. The $6,000 camera is not heavy enough. But why do farmers do spring tillage? So what we hear most of the time is to warm and dry the soil. Okay, so of all the channels on YouTube that are trying to convince us that we need to do spring tillage, have you ever seen any of them pull out a thermometer before they did the tillage? Have you seen any of them ever, whether it's fall tillage, spring tillage, anything, have you ever seen any of them use a soil probe? I've never have. Have you ever heard of any of them? So I guarantee on YouTube this year, you will find somebody who will say, we have to do spring tillage to warm and dry the soil, as the dust is just rolling behind their tillage equipment. How many of them have you ever heard of talk about the dollars leaving their farm in that dust? That is a lot of money leaving their farm in the dust. How many of them channels have you ever heard complain about input prices or commodity prices or lack of farm income? They had a smooth field. They spent $65 an acre to tear the field up, to make it smooth again, and then blow anything that they've built away in the wind. How many of them channels, how many farmers on YouTube, I ain't picking on this is just general questions. I'm not picking on anybody. I'm asking questions. How many of them have ever talked about the water when it's summertime and in the spring you watch them lose 2 inches of rain from that spring tillage? 2 inches of rain from their soil gone. How many of them channels have you heard behind the planter then say, boy, sure hope we get some timely rains this year, when they just lost 2 inches worth of moisture? How many of them channels come midsummer when that row between that corn or beans is perfectly clean? Not a lick of life whatsoever. How many of them have ever talked about how much water they're losing from evaporation and respiration in the plants to just try and keep the plants cool, not even growing? At that point, the plants are not growing. They are drought stressing, they are heat stressing, and you are losing dollars per acre. How many of them ever talked about that versus how many of them are just like, boy, we could use that $1 million rain right now? But how many of them have said, well, needing that $1 million rain in the fall, how many of them have talked about how much water left their farm because they had to do all that tiling because of excessive water in the spring, and now come summertime they're complaining that they need more water? I'm asking, why would you not invest your dollars so the water that you got fell on your farm and stayed in the soil profile, so maybe come summertime on mini droughts, we're not talking 1988 drought, we're talking average seasonal 2 weeks, 3 weeks dry period. Why would you not invest your time and money into keeping that water in your profile? How many people have you heard on YouTube say, I'm too wet, I'm too cold, I'm too far north, it don't work here, my soil has too much clay, my soil is too black and too sticky for any of that stuff to work here? It's 2020. Ignorant statements like that no longer fly. This isn't 1950. It's 2020. There is more than enough data that soil health is working in every state around the world. Every state, every country, every region around the world, every soil type. Soil health principles are working and farmers are doing it. It's not just lab people. It's your neighbors, some guy a little bit down the road. And if you want to say, well, but my soil is completely different, you're right. Your soil is too heavy because you've worked all the oxygen and all the life out of the soil and you have a dense concrete powder. How many farmers on YouTube that are full tillage farmers have you heard say, I'll have to keep working this field up because if I don't work it, it'll turn to concrete and it'll turn rock hard. So now that we're done with questions and answers, it's almost 50 degrees today. According to my little thermometer, it's like 50, maybe a 52. Maybe a 52. That's enough talking. Let's put the thermometer in the ground and see. We'll go in the grass here behind me. We'll go in the grass along the ditch where I can find some good thick grass so the sunlight isn't touching the soil, and we'll see what the temperature is. It's reading about 50 degrees exactly up here in the sunlight. At right there's a notch. So if I palm it and I go like that, that's 3 inches. If you don't believe me, there's my thumb. That is 3 inches of depth, almost 3 1/8. And we will palm it in the soil and we will read the temperature. And then we might go across the road to a tilled field and we'll read the temperature there and see how much difference they are between them and if it's justifiable to spend 15, well now the field's rough, but if it's worthwhile for them to have to do the work to warm and dry the soil. All right, good thick grassy, let me turn so I'm out of the shadow. Good thick grassy area. We're right on the edge of the field. If I go in there, there might be a chance of exposed soil and I don't want to ruin the experiment. So let's make it as impossible as we can. So there's our little thermometer. And I will just palm it like I do. You can see the rib right there. And I just stick it in. And it's a fast acting thermometer. Kind of hard to see. It's looking like a 44, 45 degrees. We can try a spot in the field to see is there a difference here. Let's go. There's a clump of grass. Let's go in that clump of grass. Push it down a little extra. He's still right there, 43, 44. If we go to some exposed soil, exposed soil still right there, 43, 44 degrees. We come over to the tilled field. We find a spot of bare dirt. We palm it in our hand. We plunk it down. Can you, looks like 44, 45 degrees. There's a rock right there. Still stays right at that same, spot. 44, 45 degrees. Okay, so if it's the same temperature as that ultra thick grass, I'm not seeing any justification right now to work this soil. Let's try out in the field. How about where it's green? What if we stab into something green and see what it says? Palm it, put it in. Still right there, same temperature, still at that 45 degrees. 45 degrees means we're planting corn if the forecast looks good. How about here? Let's try, you got all the corn still over there, you got some cover crops underneath, you got 2 rows of stumps here, you got the other years of corn, and you got last year's of corn. If I can, well, it ain't gonna warm up that quick. So let's just move it. Man, look how gorgeous that looks. We put her in. Da, 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 da. Still looks like 41 degrees. So it's literally only a couple degrees cold. So we just proved, fact, in that thick grass, in several scenarios, we're right within that target range of planting corn right next to the tilled soil. So what is the point of working the soil to dry it up? The folks that are saying we're sticky, we have to do it. I understand that soil, and that is a soil health issue. That is not a the excuse is the ignorant statement of I'm too much clay, too wet, too sticky. That don't fly anymore. That's bunk. We've already just proven it a million times. If I was in conventional field out here and I tried planting right behind a rain, my gauge wheels would ball up just like anywhere else. It just balls up differently, but it still just balls up. Now that we have soil health going, I can plant when the soil's wetter. I can plant earlier.